There we go. Hi, welcome everyone to the observation deck. I am Captain Ron, and today I'm joined by Steve Bassett, Tracey Garbutt, and Alan B. Smith. I really appreciate you guys joining me today. This is going to be a lot of fun. We've got limited time, so I want to just kind of get to everybody more than once. So let's kind of jump right in. Let's start off with you, Steve. You've been at this an awfully long time. As of today, where do you sit with what's happening, and what do you think is who or what do you think is visiting us?
Okay, let's see. I'll give you a quick
Easy
answer to
one.
that. I personally have met most of the ETs, and we've talked about what I should be able to say or not say. They've got me on a couple of NDAs, but I'll try to work around those. Let me say this. Over the last 5 years, we've made extraordinary progress, unprecedented progress. For those that just got to the issue back in 2017, they think this is normal, meaning, oh yeah, this is how it's always been. So like, hey, why don't you do more? Well, how about this? Why about that? I get it. That's the way it works. That's the way life is. Okay. Could we have made all of this same amount of progress in a year as opposed to 5 years? Yeah, we could. But let me put it this way. Trying to change government policy, particularly when it's entrenched or national security, it's pretty much like trying to change a tire on your car with just your bare hands. Right? It's really difficult, but given enough time, you could probably do it. Now, if funding became available so you could buy a lug wrench and a jack, you could probably change it a lot sooner. One of the things I've learned in 26 years on this is that the entities, the number of entities, the size of entities that are willing to fund the political disclosure process are few. The number of people and entities that are willing to spend tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars looking for signals from extraterrestrials in the sky are many. And while that doesn't make a damn bit of sense, and it's nuts, that's the way it is. And I kind of knew that getting in. So this process continues 5 years after the emergence of the TTSA. And that 5 years of progress has certainly opened a possibility to get this thing resolved. Except the world is big and large, and a lot of things happen. And whatever your plans are, whether it's starting a company or a family or trying to pursue an activist goal or anything else, including going to the store to buy groceries, the world is more than happy to dish up some really profound obstacles, like the worst pandemic in human history. All right. Nothing else is even close for those that are reading things about the fact that the whole thing is just being put on as a ruse. Worst pandemic in human history. All right. Secondly, probably the worst political stretch in the history of America, going all the way back to Washington. 7 years of absolute total chaos, toxic poison, and gangrenous activity on the part of our political leaders. And then, if that wasn't enough, the worst war in Europe since 1940s, with daily, regular, consistent articles and statements from officials in the US, Europe, and Russia about the imminent potential use of nuclear weapons. Nothing like that even happened during the Cuban Missile Crisis. So we're supposed to resolve this issue anyway. Man, it's tough, right? But if you don't want to you don't like tough, you don't want to become a political activist, and you don't want to take on any issues directly engaging the most powerful government in the world. So I have some optimism and I have some pessimism, but assuming we don't have a nuclear war, assuming politics settles down, all right, it's possible. And given the fact that the issue over the last 5 years greater than ever, has literally been embedded in the human mind through social media. In other words, how do you put it this way? The whole ET reality issue and the exopolitics issue has virtually ingrained itself now in the full social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, you name it. It's all over the place. It's being shared and podcast and whatever. It's never going to go away. For those of you that have ever said anything stupid on the internet or in a post, you probably know now it never goes away, ever. Okay? So that ensures that ultimately we prevail, because the government never had to face a situation like that. In Project Blue Book, get rid of NICAP, put out a few lies, and people will just not pay attention for another 20, 30 years. Yeah, no longer. Okay, so the moment things settle down, this issue comes back in the forefront. I believe that there are many politicians on the Hill that are ready for that, but they are not going to step out now. They're not going to hold hearings now, not in the middle of this grotesque situation. But if we can get through this time, if we can get beyond this latest miscue, okay, the untold slaughter of men, women, and children by a man with cancer and Parkinson's disease, lost his mind, being backed up by even people in our own country. If we can get past that without a tactical nuke being used in Ukraine, or some U.S. plane shot down, or whatever the else that could happen, that could escalate to DEFCON 3 and then 2 in this country. If we can get past that, I believe this issue will come back to life. We can get congressional hearings. Once those witnesses testify, the stage is set for the president to introduce the reality and the confirmation of the ET presence. And I'll end with this. For those who are really paying attention to war and drought and famine and other environmental issues, as well as the decay of democracies and politics, who think we haven't got a snowball's chance in hell barring a deus ex machina, you're right. We don't. The only way we're going to get out of this friggin' mess that we've spent a long time creating, that's now how would you say, the circumstances involving 8 billion people, is we need a massive change of state. We need a paradigm shift of untold magnitude. We need disclosure of the extraterrestrial presence. If we don't get it, we haven't got a snowball's chance in hell.
Wow.
Sorry for the mixed news.
Words. No, listen, that's what you're here for, Steve. Tracey, you have some thoughts on that?
Well, I think when we ask ourselves the question, why might they be here now? I think Steve just outlined a gigantic bunch of reasons why they would be looking at us now. And now I will qualify now as, maybe the last 50, 60 years, this 100-year packet, this timeline, perhaps, if they can, I assume that they have, they are, this is my own assumption, existing outside of time, my own assumption, but they would see what was coming in our timeline. And, I was thinking of all these other things I was going to say. And then when Steve was going through this, I'm like, yeah, here's the why right here. Here's the why they might be getting involved, because we are kind of coming to this, incredible crisis in every different facet you could imagine. So, I just wanted to start by saying that as I was listening to Steve, I'm like, yeah, listen to this, listen to the state of where we are right now and where we're heading. So there's all of this, and then we have all of the things ahead of us that might interest them as well, such as, where we're heading with artificial intelligence, for example. That's a giant wild card. We don't know to what extent that is going to change everything. And when I say that, I mean, we know it's going to affect and change absolutely everything, because obviously the goal will be heading towards conscious AI. Some people believe in singularity, some people do not, but no matter what, we might not be able to tell the difference. We have all sorts of existential threats that are, everything from environmental to artificial intelligence. And then we also have us becoming a space-faring civilization not too far off in the future. I believe it. Elon Musk, I believe, if I don't have this wrong, his goal is to be colonizing Mars by 2050. And I haven't listened to this recently, but I know he had a large number of people he wanted to see colonizing Mars around that time. And so, I mean, we're going into their domain as well. So it's just another thing to add to the table of possibly why. I wasn't going to start with that, but Steve just really took me there.
That's fine. That's what we're here for. That's great. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's part of the whole explanation. Part of the whole exploration, because some people might argue we can argue over who they are, what they look like, but we may never know, because one thing we do know is that there's cognitive manipulation. I would say that is the number one thing that we probably know. So they could show themselves however they want. They have greater cognitive abilities than us. I think we can start there. I forget what I was going to say about that.
Well, clearly they're clandestine by choice. They could expose themselves immediately if they wanted to.
Yeah, they could. And I think sometimes they do. I think sometimes they do. But for the most part, no. I'm sorry. I totally lost my train of thought with what I was going to say with that.
That's okay, Tracey.
We'll come back. We'll come back to it.
Alan, real quick. Alan, you've been interviewing a lot of people that have discussed this topic. What are you feeling, and what's the consensus out there among the experts you've talked to?
Thank you so much again, Ron, for having me on here today with these amazing people. Steve has been on Paranormal Now recently, and what I love about Steve is he thinks big, and every time we have a conversation, or he has a conversation with anybody, there is that like tug back and forth between being optimistic and being realistic, and I think some people confuse being realistic with pessimism. I have a strange look on this. I think that because we're trying to talk about extraterrestrial existence, and how many alien species are there? I mean, do we really know? Rick Doty was on the show just recently, and he says he was told there are 11 species out there.
I've heard 82. I've heard 127. I've heard there's
Sure.
number. Everybody's got a
57 too.
right.
And much of this is hearsay, and you can't really. It's not verifiable. But I think that it's still important that we go down these lines of investigation to try to start doing some record keeping. And then the more data that we have, if indeed we do make, obvious ET contact, maybe there's something in that data that we can refer to. So we can look at these aliens that we make contact with and start looking at some of these reports that abductees or contactees have had, and that might actually give us an advantage. So I would say don't just throw all of that out. Even though much of it is speculation, I think it's really important that we do consider it. And yeah, so I think that often we're faced with this question of, are we in an existential crisis? Are ETs here because of the Trinity test site, atomic explosions, and now we suddenly got their attention? And there's the fear that a human species or an intelligent species, we see this in science all the time, discussing how well a intelligent species can navigate the chaos of universe or just self-awareness in the first place. And just really, other than ourselves, we have no way to understand that. So there's this idea that we have to save ourselves before we extinguish ourselves. But it seems to me that it's built into the very human nature to self-preserve. And so the very idea that we're talking about this, that we're saying, be scared, be afraid, that's that self-preservation mechanism kicking in to help save us so that we don't self-extinguish. And if we assume that other intelligent life has that same capability, then that gives me hope that there aren't just a bunch of intelligent species popping up on planets all over the universe that just destroy themselves. I think that's an assumption that is based on nothing other than our own assumption on our own future, which we aren't even aware of yet. There are about 150 billion stars in the universe they're guesstimating born every year. That's crazy.
New ones?
New ones.
Jesus.
So it's about 400 million, I think. I'm sorry, I think it's 400 million per year, if I'm correct. And then there are a certain percentage of those that have habitable planets on there, right? So what are the odds that every single microorganism that evolves, reaches the state of intelligence, and then you have to extrapolate from there. How long can that intelligence survive? It's almost infinite, the number of organisms that can crop up in this universe and self-perpetuate. And I think that what we're seeing, and this ties into what Tracey is saying, is that some of these extraterrestrials, if you want to call them that, or better yet, I like exoconsciousness. I like that phrase, because there is this idea that they seem to be slipping in and out of reality as we understand it. And that would tie into what Tracey was saying about time. So of all the possibilities of all the different types of species that we can't even imagine that might exist, it seems to me that something is coming through and communicating with people here. Now, you can argue whether that's a 3D being, a nut, quote unquote, nuts and bolts being that came from, Sirius B, Zeta Reticuli, whatever it is, and just flew their craft over here, and they're visiting, and our Lear instruments are picking up these craft, and that's all it is. Or you can say maybe they are a far more complex and perhaps nearly incomprehensible consciousness that we don't understand. And if that's the case, sure, perhaps they can come into our 3D reality, appear as a UFO, a flying saucer, but then also kind of slip back into whatever dimension they came from. There is the parallel between close alien abduction cases and mystical and like religious experiences. Terence McKenna, who's one of my favorite minds, bless his soul, has passed, but he makes a really good analogy when comparing the study of ufology and alien abductions to what he was studying, which was psychedelics and these weird experiences that people would have on psychedelics. And he said what the psychedelic had was repeatability. So you could smoke DMT, you can do ayahuasca, and say, wow, I saw these beings, these elf-like beings, or this serpent-like entity. And you can say to someone else, here, try this. And then they can have that experience as well. And there was, Rick Strassman did a study on this, of course. So you have repeatability with what I would call an exo-consciousness. There's something on the other side during that experience that psychonauts are seeing and experiencing. And I think that in ufology, that's where we want to get to. And I know I'm going kind of on the fringe here, but I'm very, very much comfortable with the paranormal, Steve, your favorite word. And that's where I live, because there clearly is an overlapping of these instances. So to get back to our ETs coming here, and how do we deal with that as from a study of ufology? I think that we need to find something like the DMT people have, some way to have a repeatability to make conscious contact with these things. Now, CE5, there's a lot of people that claim that works for them, and I think that perhaps if you can get enough repeatability, if you can, like meditation, if you can train people in a certain way to say, I can call down a UFO, like Prophet, what was his name? Ishmael?
There's several guys that can do that.
Yeah. That would be impressive. Because I know there are a couple of instances where he, on recorded news, called down a UFO, and it was this anomalous thing that came up through the sky, and that's caught on camera. You can look that up online. But how often do you get that repeatability? Very rare. So I think that's where we need to get to. If we can get to that place, then I think we'll know what questions to ask as far as what kind of species or consciousness we're dealing with here. But again, like all of this, it's like constantly slipping through your fingers.
Yeah.
Because you hear one report and then another report, and you're talking about really bizarre stuff, which I know there's probably a lot of people in UFO Twitter world who are like going like this, like, oh my God, can we just stick to the documents, please? And I get that. Like you need that study. You need that hardcore science. Like Mark D'Antonio often says, like you need someone to do that boring and hard work. But it doesn't mean you ignore everything else. In the early days of science, the study of geology, they didn't understand that had anything to do with fusion and star formations, relating to the geology here and the chemistry on Earth. They didn't understand that. But it doesn't mean that you don't study, take those two studies and merge them together at some point. And so I think like often what's called paranormal may better be phrased like a fringe science. It's loose, it's speculative, but there's something there. And we need to take the time to look into it. Don't throw it out. If that's not your thing, that's fine. Let those of us who are interested in it study it, and then you focus on your thing, and let's compare notes, and then hopefully we'll arrive someday at like a unified field theory for all of this.
It's an excellent point that this is not a repeatable thing, and it's an unknown that we're studying. We have personal first-person accounts, but that only goes so far to most people. Steve, do you want to address what Alan was saying there?
No, I think he said it. He got into that zone and discussed it well. Let me go back to basics. The second half of your question. Look, here are the basic questions. Who are they?
Right.
Where are they from? How did they get here? Why are they here? What are they doing to service why they are here? And what might we expect? Okay. Who are they? I have very high confidence that they are sentient beings who did not evolve on the planet Earth. They haven't been here all along, living in caves, hiding in mountains or whatever. They evolved somewhere else. Okay. How many species or types are there? I don't know. It only matters that there's one, right? One is enough. One extraterrestrial set of beings visiting us is enough. We don't need to confirm whether it's 1, 9, 20, 85, or 57 varieties to move forward and resolve this issue. We just need to know there's one here. Okay? How do they get here? And where are they from? So obviously they're from outside the planet. No evidence that they're based in the solar system. So that means another star system. They got here through some sort of travel, which is more convenient than rockets. Our physics is already closing in on that explanation, so I feel good about that. Interstellar drive. Okay. Why are they here? All right. Again,
but Steve, you think physical, not interdimensional. You think it's still that they figured out the drives to get here.
Again, until you have real clear evidence and indications that something is outside of our dimensions, let's just stay within our dimensions. All right. The physics of interstellar travel that's emerging in our own physicists, including some rogue physicists out there that are really interesting, isn't really interdimensional. It kind of looks a little like it, but it probably is not. It's a workaround relativity. So interdimensionality and time travel and stuff is wonderful. It's fun. It makes for great movies and everything. But in terms of going there regarding this issue, we don't really, if there's no basis to go there yet. And I can assure you going there doesn't help the political process. We don't want to be calling witnesses to sit before Marco Rubio and Mark Warner and the Intel committee to talk about time travel possibilities. Let's hold that until the post-disclosure world. And so the why is interesting. I can't ask them why, all right? But we can judge the why on what their actions are. But let's step back about something else in terms of who they are, all right? Something that is not given a lot of attention in what I call the activist movement, but for good reason. But that doesn't mean it isn't there, and it doesn't mean I'm not paying very close attention. Some of the most important evidence we have, period, better than even the Nimitz case, is the fact that hundreds of thousands of people have privately conveyed their personal experiences with ETs coming into their bedrooms or elsewhere, engaging them and taking them places. Not one, not 1,000, not tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. Now, a major portion of those accounts were sent to Whitley and Ann Strieber. Ann read them all, reviewed them all, actually wrote a book, sort of compilation, talking about what she got, the general take from those hundreds of thousands of written cases submitted privately, no expectation of money or fame or anything else. Interestingly enough, tens of thousands of those written, I don't think emails were involved. I think email is a whole nother set of documents, but written on paper accounts sent to them were just delivered by Jordan Peace to the university, Rice University in Texas, which apparently felt it was worth having these hundreds of thousands. So that's where they are. Somebody, some fine reporter for the Washington Post could head on down to Texas and read, 1,000 of them. And what that person would see is that within that larger context, there is a core amount of information which is so consistent, it simply cannot be denied, which includes the fact that many of these contactees are artists. They can draw and they can paint pretty well. And either from their own conscious memories or from memories derived through assistance with hypnosis and so forth, they have drawn the ETs, they have painted them. And so I am confident we actually know what they look like. And if you go on Google and put in extraterrestrial types, alien types, hit images, boom, they come up. Now, some little weird, focus on the ones that seem to be in that zone. There seems to be about 5 or 6 types. So we know what they look like because they have been drawn and painted by the people that have been in the same room with them. That's pretty good. Now you may say, okay, well, wow, that is powerful. So why isn't that front and center of all the action? Because what's going on now is not just science. John Mack tried to get in that area way back in 1990, 30 years before Avi Loeb turned up. He was actually interviewing contactees. He was going there, and Harvard tried to destroy him. Almost succeeded. He was able to do some more work, but then he was hit by a truck. It was an accident. And then Harvard went dead, silent, crickets, until Avi Loeb showed up. And now he's looking for signals in the sky, which means he's brought Harvard up to about 1958. But okay, I'll take whatever I can get. All right. So we kind of know what they look like. We know one of the things they're doing in terms of the why, because there are thousands of tens of thousands of reports of how they deal with the contactees. Movies have been made, narrative, fiction, nonfiction, right? The fiction tended to, how would you say, exaggerate a little bit. but overall, particularly in the nonfiction, you get a sense of what they're doing. It's pretty significant. And it involves an enormous amount of what we'd like to call genetic work. So we know about that, but we can't emphasize it right now. So why am I saying it right now? Well, because I say emphasize. I mean, we can't make it the forefront of the movement, but we can't ignore it. And the contactees like to be reminded that they exist and that they matter and their evidence is important, right? Because they've been treated like other people and forced to live in a closet since the 1940s. And I never liked that as an activist, okay? What else are they doing? Well, there's something else they're doing, which from the political standpoint, from the immediate standpoint, particularly as it pertains to what's going on in the world right now, and I can't overemphasize this enough, they turn off our nuclear weapons. Not once, not twice, but numerous times. They've turned off Soviet nuclear weapons, Russian nuclear weapons. They've turned them on, meaning they put them into launch mode. And you may say, well, that's pretty intense. I mean, that should be like big time investigations and articles and hearings on the Hill. No, because that is way too intense, way too serious. And so the US government, the Air Force, the DOD, and everybody else pretended all of the scores of witnesses to this never existed. This is all they could do. They couldn't kill them. They couldn't undermine them, destroy them on the internet. They just had to pretend they didn't exist. Bob Salas just doesn't exist, right? So I don't know what you're talking about. Now that gives you a sense of how kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Somewhat insidious this has gotten when SAC base, highly secured, top of the line officers who have direct personal testimony of the witnesses being shut down while craft are over their sites are pretended to be non-existent because it's inconvenient for the government. But it's not inconvenient for us. And so one of the things you're seeing happen is the testimony of these witnesses is slowly making its way. And in the last year, it's starting to turn up in articles. It's starting to turn up in some DOD stuff. They're slowly getting to the point where, yeah, the DOD is finally going to admit that in addition to those definitely real things that are flying around the Nimitz craft, there were some definitely real things flying around some of our SAC-based nuclear facilities. And coincidentally, all of the missiles shut off. So let's look at that. Let's study that, right, and see what we've got. All right. That why, that action behind the why is the most important thing we have got to focus on. Everything else, hybrid children, taking sperm, whatever the hell they're doing with genetics, that's cool. It's interesting. I'd like to know the science, but it's trivial compared to why are they turning our nuclear weapons off? What would they do if we started a nuclear war? What would they do if we did not start a war, but started to get rid of nuclear weapons? What would they do if, in fact, we disclosed the ET presence, right? Would open contact take place after that? I've talked about this at length. So I won't go into it. These are some pretty important whats and whys that get to their whys. So that's how I tend to look at it. I try not to get into too many speculations about the whats and the whys and the whos and the wheres and so forth. They could be coming from the future. They could be coming from the middle of the earth. They could be coming in other dimensions. But for now, I'm more than happy that they come from another planet and another star system. And they've been watching us for thousands of years. And now we've got nuclear weapons. We've used them. We've killed our own people with them. We've built thousands more. And somehow that has very much to do with why 2 years after we slaughtered some people in Japan, and by slaughter, I mean we killed some of them immediately and the rest suffered unbelievably until they died. Suddenly they're turning up all over the damn world. One crashes in Roswell, and then 10 years, 20 years later, they're turning off our nuclear weapons. That's a real why that I want people to focus on, particularly.
Totally. And Steve, the post-disclosure world, as you call it, that's when we can worry about these details of what kind of crafts they are, what kind of, where they're coming from and all that. Let's just get to the
There is a huge volume of stuff that we will be able to get to in the post-disclosure world after confirmation has come from the heads of state. And the reason it's kind of a problem is that there's a lot of people that want to get to it now. We want to know all of it now. And the government loves that. Okay, look, you don't have the money, you don't have the labs, you don't have the resources, and a lot of it we already know. But hey, take the next 20 years trying to figure it all out.
That's a problem in this community. Fighting against each other about all these little tiny minute details that don't matter.
Because then the truth embargo gets to go on, right? In other words, you can study it and read. By the way, the ET presence has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt for 60 years. But if we want to keep reproving it over and over and over and over and over again and arguing about every aspect, that's fine with them. Take all the time you need. Take at least as long until I don't have to answer any hard questions in front of the press when the president finally says, yeah, they've been here all along, right? And some think you should never know. Take the end of time. You can't handle it. You don't have a right to know. It's purely our prerogative as supreme human beings working in the national security states of Russia and the United States and so forth, which is a sense of arrogance and hubris, which really it's hard to measure, but that's how some of them operate. But it's changing. They're losing ground. We're moving forward. So ultimately, we will get disclosure. And I invite people to enjoy investigating every aspect of this, but understand, if you really want to see the answers to your myriads of questions, help us get the money to get the president in the hearings to confirm the ET presence so we can move on with civilization in our lifetime.
Let's get to that first. I agree. That's a great point, Steve. Tracey, you had a front row seat to this Rice University with Jeffrey Kripal delivery from Jordan Pease. You want to shed some light on him?
Yeah, I did. Actually, I was just there. And I was going through Ann Strieber's letters, as were the people I was with. Yeah, I was with Lori and Jordan, Lori Wagner, Jordan Pease, and there were all sorts of files that were fascinating, and I couldn't get to them all. There's a big collection from Ed Dames. There's Richard Haynes. I mean, there is incredible information there. If people ever want to go and check it out, you just have to book ahead. But looking at Ann Strieber's letters was really an incredible experience, because again, like Steve said, we're not talking about emails. We're looking at handwritten letters from people. So you see all this different handwriting. You see pages and pages. You see pictures sometimes of the people. You see drawings from these people. You see these commonalities in this desperation, because their whole world paradigm has been completely shattered. And in many cases, it's not just the person who's writing. They're also talking about their family members who don't really want to talk about it. But what you're seeing is trauma a lot of the time. You're seeing this. They don't have anyone or anything to cling on to. They're looking for understanding. And it's true, like Steve was saying, they're kind of hiding in, nobody understands what's going on with them. They didn't have, especially back then, they didn't really have anyone to talk to. So you would see this letter after letter after letter. These incredible stories. But what always really stands out to me is the psychological process that these people have gone through to actually reach out to Anne and Whitley. You can really hear this in what they're writing. It took them a lot. They've been dealing with so much with no support anywhere. And then to actually be able to write this to somebody, these, paradigm shattering, reality shattering experiences that sound absolutely crazy. You read the pain that they are experiencing in their life, and it really affects you. But also, like I was saying, every letter looks completely different. Some are, teeny tiny little pages like this with Scotty dogs on them. They're writing, and then you see these big sort of, script written letters, but every one of them is so many pages, and you've got all different ages. I was reading some from 19 and 20-year-olds saying they did not know what to do. They'd had these experiences and they had nobody to talk to.
And they have nothing to gain by sending this letter. It's not like they're seeking fame, fortune, or whatever.
Right. And most of the time they don't want anybody to know. So people always have that argument, oh, people are just looking for attention, or they're, whatever. That's BS, because these people, most of the time, it's very clear they want to be anonymous, but they want understanding, and they really want validation, because they're a part of it would seem a part of their life, a part of their psyche is stuck there. A part of them is having a hard time moving forward. And you see that too. And until they find some sort of way to reconcile this psychologically, sociologically, spiritually, they're kind of stuck. And it's heartbreaking to go through these letters, and just when you think you have a pile this big, there's another box and another box and another box. And you start to see the drawings. The drawings are so crystal clear. Like, I bring up the cognitive manipulation because I always feel that is a variable that is hard to control for and that we need to mention. However, it's true what Steve said. The drawings are crystal clear. It's not, for a lot of them, it's not. It's clear. Like they saw these beings in this particular way, and sure, maybe they do look like something else, but these were the experiences these people had. And some people will think, okay, well, I hear they happen in dreams. Well, no, they don't always happen in dreams. And I don't want to discount that realm either. A lot of these people are having daytime visitations. Some are having nighttime visitations. Some are having etheric visitations, and we can't quite separate that, but it's coming in all sorts of realms. We've got conscious, etheric, possibly interdimensional, possibly, like, I don't know. I personally try to look at this because I don't feel we can control for all the variables. But I try to just have an open mind to more and more information that's coming. I myself have started going into abduction research and doing qualitative interviews with abductees now firsthand. And this is really an amazing process. I'm learning so much, but it is clear, again, like Steve said, there are patterns that we already know about. And as you read more of these letters, they do fit into these categories very nicely. That those categories are there. Then we have a lot of fringe and outliers and all sorts of other realms of things. But there are definite categories of experiences that are happening. And it's clear it's been going on for a long time. So these I highly recommend if anyone ever gets a chance, and you really, if you're on the fence about this is a good place to go visit and pull out those letters. I mean, you can always read Anne Strieber's book, which is the Communion Letters, but it's a different experience to see them firsthand and read them and read about their experiences and their children and their families and how they haven't been able to cope with this, changing everything in their life. I mean, it shatters their ideas sometimes about religion, sometimes not. Sometimes it deepens their experience with religion. It changes their viewpoint on spirituality. But it is affecting them to their core, and we cannot deny that part. There is something actually happening to them. You can see it when you read these yourself. That's all I want to say about that.
Tracey, you're looking at that one collection. Then you have the Hynek collection in Chicago. You've got Klaus in Switzerland. You've got all of these researchers that have collected stuff over the years. Dr. Jacobs, he's got thousands of volumes. So there's all of these things. Steve, I think you want to jump in there. Do you have something?
Boy, first of all, Ron, I don't know if you know what's happening here, but this is one of the very, very, very few instances in which someone on any podcast, and I've seen a zillion of them, has spoken directly about these letters and actually reading them. This just doesn't happen, right? I think Anne did it on Unknown Country perhaps a few times. Outside of that, no one has seen them. She's read them, and you just that is a very rare thing. This is very, very special. All right.
Agreed.
And oh my Lord, there's so much I could say. Look, let me tell you a story. Before, if you go back, the early people like Bud Hopkins and so forth, the tremendous work they did. All right. But it was Whitley Strieber that exploded the contact issue into the world. All right. This is an extraordinary thing that he did. His book, Communion, first, he's a brilliant writer, so he has a way of conveying these things in a powerful way. But he writes Communion. He's a best-selling author to begin with. There used to be bookstores back then, you may recall. And so he puts the bestseller out, Communion, and of course, it's selling like crazy. And every bookstore in the country is stacking them up in the storefront windows. And so people are walking by and they're seeing the Communion book. And guess what? It's got a picture of a gray on it, doesn't it? Okay. And it's triggering memories, particularly in women. They're going by, boom. Suddenly things are coming back and it emerges. He brings an issue that was known into the full public domain, and it's never stopped since. Okay, but let's go a little bit further. Here's something else it did. John Mack did not want to get into this issue. He was bumped about it a couple of times, but he's got a full plate and plenty of projects. He's a Pulitzer Prize winner. He didn't want to touch it, but they kept bumping him. Finally, he said, "Look, I'll go down to New York and I'll talk to Bud Hopkins, see what he has to say." He goes down and he goes to his studio there, and they're sitting talking about it. And John is trying to think, gee, I don't know if I get in this or not. And at some point, Bud says, "Look, John, I get thousands of letters, okay? And I can't read them all, so I put them in his closet over here. So if you'll go to the closet, grab 6 or 7 at random. They're unopened. Right? Open them and read them." So John goes to the closet. He holds this big pile. He grabs 6 of them, goes on, sits on the couch, and he starts reading them. Within 4 of these, he's already committed. Yeah, I'm going to get into this field. I'm going back to Cambridge. I'm going to set up an institution. It's going to be called the Program for Extraordinary Experience Research. And I'm going to get into this field as long as I can until Harvard tries to stop me. So that is just one way, those letters. By the way, Joe Montaldo also has a massive amount of letters, okay? And so, but it gets more interesting because guess what? The number of contactees is in the millions worldwide. And that means there have been plenty of contactees in the Army and the Navy and the Air Force and the Department of Defense and the CIA for a long time. And guess what? The government knew about them, found some of them, and have been working with their inside contactees for a very long time. Very convenient, by the way. Total non-disclosure, national security, never going to say anything. And they're learning about this phenomena inside in secrecy while acknowledging it doesn't exist. And guess what? We've reached a point where some of the people inside who are contactees are actually starting to come forward and say, I'm a contactee. And so when a 30-year career intelligence officer like Jim Semivan comes public and says, I'm a contactee, draw a line from that all the way back to the very first Bud Hopkins books. And then, of course, to Strieber's book. It's a long line, a lot of years. Why does it take so goddamn long? Because the issue is so profound. Its implications so extraordinary, and the problems it poses, even for a democratic national security state, are enormous. And so undoing and getting where we need to go has been tough. But let me assure you that military witnesses will be the key to the hearings that are coming that will lead to disclosure. And once that confirmation is out, the last people in the closet that I am aware of, because just about everybody else is out of the closet, frankly, but the last people of substantial numbers that are still in the closet are contactees. And after disclosure, they are coming out of the closet, and they are going to have a chance to speak their truth. They will go speak in front of Congress. They will talk to researchers. They will be interviewed by journalists. And finally, we will hear what they have to say. And when they wrote those letters to Montaldo, Jacobs, to Strieber, private, fundamentally what they were doing is saying this: I can't go public. I can't talk to my friends, but I can put this on record. One day somebody will read this, okay, and they will know my story. And those are the people that I think about when I do this work.
Absolutely. There's also, think about all the countless ones who never did write it down and never did send in that letter. There's those too. Okay, we've gone over the time here. Alan, why don't you try to concisely give your thoughts on that, and we'll move on.
Moot, 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 moot.
Uh-oh, Alan, can't hear you.
His mic's on mute. Alan, your mic. Mic. Apparently, he thinks his mic is on.
No, he knows he's off. We can't hear him. We cannot hear you, buddy.
I tried.
All right. Well, why don't we move on then to our other panelists, which that way we're not too far behind. Thank you guys so much, Steve, Tracey, Alan. I appreciate it.
Thank
Sorry
you
your
for having
mic's
me.
not working. No, really great stuff. Really appreciate it. Very short time, but very good content.
Right.
Thanks. Go put your avatars on and watch this next panel. These guys are pretty good too. All right, let's bring on Mr. Daniel Sheehan, Ray Szymanski, and none other than Richard Dolan. There he is, walking behind the scenes. You're getting the behind the scenes.
Switch out with you here.
Walking around his house. There we go. Awesome.
That's no fair. She warmed up the
most of it.
equipment.
I think your audio.
Just let's unplug this.
I think we can hear you. Are you muted?
Thank you, gentlemen. No, we can hear you guys.
No.
Keep it clean there, please. There we go. Okay, well, thank you guys for joining us. Let's just pick it right back up. Daniel, you want to comment? You've heard what we're talking about here. Do you want to just give your thoughts on that, Danny? Did we lose Danny? Hey, Mackenzie, we lost Danny now. I can't hear you.
Got it. Okay.
There we go. We got Danny. He's on.
There we go.
Go ahead, Danny.
Yeah, I was down there with Tracey.
That's right. You were also at Rice University,
That's
correct?
Right. That's right. Jordan, myself, and Lori were all down there. So we spent the whole day with the people reading through the letters and stuff. I was spending most of the day talking with Jeff Kripal.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
Yes,
we got you, Richard. Hey, bud.
All right. I cannot hear anybody.
We spent the time down
Hey,
there.
Tracy, your phone is here.
We spent the time down
What's
there.
wrong?
Richard, can you hear us?
All right. I can't hear anyone yet, but let's figure out what's wrong. Let me go check my settings.
Okay.
Audio.
What is audio's on? So
Might have that
there you go.
Okay. There we go.
Are
Good.
you with us?
I am.
Great to see you again, even if only by
Hi,
Zoom.
Danny. Yes.
Hey, Richard,
Danny
hey, Ray.
and Ray, nice to meet you, and
Yeah,
Captain Ron.
Okay, yeah, no, I was down there with Tracey and Jordan and Lori.
I do
and
know,
this,
yes.
This compilation of these letters is really quite phenomenal. And what I was doing is talking with Jeffrey about the sort of larger context in which all of these letters and all of these testimonies take place. And I was trying to have Jeffrey to explain exactly what he understood he was trying to do. And what he's trying to do is trying to get this issue, which has got some different dimensions to it, obviously, but to get this issue undertaken as a serious issue in the academy, in the universities, in the colleges, et cetera, to start getting the various departments that are pertinent to this looking at these letters, looking at these testimonies, looking at these issues. This is very similar to what Eric Weinstein has been talking about, a kind of a person who for decades poo-pooed the entire issue of UFOs and extraterrestrial life and extra-dimensional beings, all that. He just poo-pooed it all generally as a major PhD scholar, from Harvard, delivering lectures at Oxford on the origins of the universe, who viewed himself as quite adept at really sophisticated issues, still was part of that large community that just completely poo-poos this entire realm. So Eric Weinstein and guys like Jeff Kripal are now moving into looking at this, trying to get scientists and philosophers and sociologists, et cetera, to start looking at this. I think we can realistically trace most of this back to, again, the release of these these videotapes and stuff with the endorsement, basically, of the New York Times, and to some very lesser extent, the Defense Department. This is what is known as sort of an epistemological question: is what is it that most normal people do to try to figure out what's true? And what they do is they rely upon authority figures to tell them, whether it's the New York Times, or whether it's universities or government officials. And that's why this is so important. What's happened back in December of 2017 is that the New York Times and their board of editors actually made a decision that it was time to get this information out. It wasn't that they didn't know about this before, but it was very similar to the Vietnam War, when I was privileged to be one of the lawyers for the Pentagon Papers for the New York Times. And when the New York Times put all this information about the war in Vietnam up in the front pages of the New York Times, suddenly there was this whole major sea change in the American public's view of the war. They said, oh, gee, these things that these fringe people who've been opposing the war have been saying turn out to be true, because the New York Times said so. Same thing has happened now with the UFO issue and the follow-up of people like Chris Mellon and Lou Elizondo. What they're doing is they're opening the pathway for more people to listen to Richard Dolan, for example. Here, I mean, Richard has done one of the great services for this entire issue with his volumes of the UFOs in the national security state, is now working on volume 3, probably 3A and 3B.
That's right. That's exactly right. Three. We'll just say 3 and 4. But
Yeah, 3 and 4.
It's true.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that this is an extraordinary moment in our human history of opening onto this subject, because, as I've often said, this is a moment that is going to be remembered for 1,000 years into the future. These couple decades that we're all involved in this right now are going to be seen as the opening stage of an entire new dimension of human experience, reaching out into the stars, reaching out beyond the boundaries of our solar system to encounter an actual extraterrestrial intelligence. Now, this having been said, this is one of and probably the predominant, at least, theory about what all this means. The theory is that this is an extraterrestrial civilization visiting us in craft that have all kinds of extraordinary capacities, and that these beings seem to have all kinds of extraordinary capacities themselves that are that appear to be kind of interdimensional, intertemporal, etc. But the predominant theory is still that this is an extraterrestrial civilization coming to encounter us, and that if that is true for operational purposes, this is an absolutely extraordinary moment. And even though it's been terribly frustrating, over the past 75 years, basically since Roswell, it's been terribly frustrating for everybody who's been involved in this to try to get people to listen. And you can hear the testimonies and all these letters that we're talking about here today that are being gathered by Kripal down at Rice University. Their frustration in not being understood, not being believed, being attenuated. But the fact is, this short 75-year period is coming to an end. So that this is opening now onto the human conversation that has been called for even by the Catholic Church in informal statements saying, look at their pathway is, look at now that we're discovering more and more of these exoplanets, and it appears that these other planets may well harbor life, and potentially much more advanced life than our planet. The time has now arrived to begin the conversation among all of us of the profound philosophical and theological questions, at least, that are presented by the encounter with an extraterrestrial civilization. And that's the period I think we're in. That's the nature of the conversation that I think we need to participate in now. Instead of banging our head against this, saying, you got to listen to us, you got to listen to us, this is true, this is true. We really start to need to move into this more profound and deeper conversation about what this means. Those are just my introductory thoughts here for the day.
Richard, you wanna comment on that?
Yeah, there's a lot. Thank you, Dan. It was a great kind of lead into some of these issues. I just want to give props to the last group that you had on here, Ron, which included my wife, Tracey, along with Alan Smith and Steve Bassett. I thought that was a fantastic conversation. And those themes, I think, will lead into what we're talking about here. In fact, I want to tack on to that theme because I think it's relevant for here, which is who are they and why are they here? And the only reason I just want to harken back to that is because the last book I wrote literally deals with both of those two issues. It's my own speculation, like who are they and why are they here? I call it the alien agendas. And very shortly, I'll say, I believe, we can't know 100% with 100% certainty, but I think I'm just speculating. I think I do know roughly who they are, and I think I roughly have an idea why they're here. And that affects our disclosure conversation. And, we've talked about, well, we achieved nuclear technology in the 1940s. And yeah, that's significant. But I think in the larger view, they're here because we're about to leap right into their world. Mm-hmm. We're entering a new phase of human organization. We went for hundreds of thousands of years as hunters and gatherers. We developed agriculture roughly about 10,000 years ago. That's stage 2 of human society. And then we entered science and industry a couple of 100 years ago, where we completely reorganize ourselves again. Fundamental. These are, there's variations within all of those, but these are basic foundational forms of organization that human beings have had. And we are now entering a 4th phase now, right now. where we're entering a transhumanist, artificial intelligence, 4G, 5G, 6G surveillance society, basically a human anthill under complete surveillance for the rest of all time, as far as I can see. A fundamental change of human society, maybe almost like the Borg, maybe. But and you can see, like, I don't have a good feeling about this transformation, but it's happening anyway. Who cares what I think? So the point is, we're changing. We're disempowering ourselves individually, but we are definitely empowering ourselves as a species. The weaponry, the technology, space-time manipulation, all of this is so unbelievably fast in the long stretch of history. And so my feeling is that it does look to me that we've been observed for a long time, but the intensive management, the intensive interaction, this is recent, I believe, and only really from the 20th century onward now, when it became evident that these beings could see, here now is humanity. Now they've got the fire of Prometheus. They've got the secret of science, and they're going to be jumping right into this kind of new thing. And this, I think, is what we're seeing going on all around us. This is why we're in the midst of a global revolution. No one calls it a revolution, but that's what it is. It's a centralized, bureaucratized, legalistic, internationally top-down directed global revolution to transform human society basically into a technological police state. But I think that's from the point of view of these other aliens, which I do think there are aliens from other places that are here. I speculate they may want that. That might be good from their point of view. They may not want to deal with 200 separate nations. They might want to deal with a single unified entity where you manage 8 billion human beings into one collective. It's a lot simpler, maybe. I don't have the idea, by the way, that was prevalent in prior eras where these aliens are going to help us move into a new, like an intergalactic brotherhood. I don't believe that. Some people can believe that, and that's fine. I don't. I think I've come to feel it's a delusion. And what I think is that they, like us, probably are interested in their survival. And they are operating on vastly more sophisticated levels of science than we are right now. But that I don't think that science increases in a linear way. I think it increases by leaps. So we're leaping and jumping into a level of a much greater level of parity than we might realize. And I think that they are aware of this. And I think for that reason, it's very important for them to manage our process to the extent possible. And the big question that I ask myself, and I'm going to leave it off here, is we're going through a global revolution right now. And the real question I want to ask is, what is their relationship to that revolution? Do they love it? Are they helping to promote it? Are they indifferent? Do they oppose it? And is there more than one group of them? Which I think we might assume that there probably are multiple groups, because I do think our transformation is probably bringing in the entire galactic neighborhood right now to take a look, because I think we're more significant than even a lot of Dan was talking about the academicians. I just want to refer to that now. I was on the panel with Danny and Eric Weinstein last summer. That was very nice. And I'm familiar with Jeffrey Kripal's work and some of the other folks in academia. I think they have a long, long, long way to go before they have a sophisticated understanding of this phenomenon. I really do. I think the academic community is so far behind genuine research. And the problem that you find with academicians, and I'm going to generalize, but I think it's true, they think they know a lot more than they know. And they don't realize how steep a learning curve this subject is. And the big problem with the UFO phenomenon, and the real serious issue that we have going forward, is that we are in the middle of a revolution. It is a totalitarian revolution of control. And this is happening. And you can see it. There's now Elon Musk buying Twitter, and that's okay. Maybe that will help things. Maybe it will. It could. But how long will that help? Because the power is absolutely, clearly going toward a direction of control, not freedom, control. And the UFO subject, you see, is very explosive. It's not a safe subject. It is a dangerous subject. We have to recognize it's not dangerous when good people like Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon are very carefully saying things like, well, maybe there's something out there. We don't know what they are. Well, yes, first they do know what they are, but they have to follow the CYA rule, which, okay, we get that. But the fact is that they are forced in the public domain to talk about this at the kindergarten level, because that's all that not the people can handle, but the establishment can handle. When the New York Times published those stories almost 5 years ago, it wasn't the New York Times decision, I'm quite sure. I think Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal just jumped in because To the Stars Academy did their press conference 2 months earlier, and this stuff was coming out. And Leslie and Ralph jumped on this story, and the New York Times realized we can't throw cold water on this forever. Let's get out ahead of this. And what did they do in that article, by the way? They basically forced Leslie and Ralph to throw in these ridiculous, irrelevant, skeptical comments that had nothing to do with anything, but were skeptical placeholders. And since Leslie and Ralph have not done articles, what kind of pieces has the New York Times done? Nothing. The only good work the New York Times has done is from Leslie and Ralph. That's it. The rest of the establishment is you have to drag these people. So my point is, the UFO subject, when you get into the real issues, okay, what are the real issues? Tracey and Steve were talking last section about the communion letters. That's the abduction phenomenon. That's real. And the cover-up, the deep, deep, deep illegal criminal nature of the UFO cover-up is the other. And those are explosive. And in a world in which we're looking at a technological police state type revolution, internationally directed from above, that is, it's not easily going to let that conversation happen. To me, this is the next generation. This is where we have to focus, is opening that up, because I think it's entirely possible that we lose the opportunity. And when the doors closed, when everyone's plugged into the meta world, sucking the tube that the Matrix offers them for their sustenance, and then it's done. It's over. Then they're captured. So this really is our moment. And what a post-disclosure world would even like. I think about this a lot, but I'm a little bit concerned right now, because it seems to me that we're dealing with a very, very genuine totalitarian movement against the people right now. And my fear has always been that disclosure will happen within the context of a global fascist police state. And if that's the case, I'll pass. I'll take one of Elon's rockets to the Mars and live there with Tracey.
There you go.
Get a little underground bunker and hang out.
It's great, Richard. You refer to the metaverse as you're addressing a metaverse of sorts, as most of the people in our audience are in avatar form right now. Ray, do you want to comment on your thoughts on the overall issues we've been discussing?
Thank you. First of all, I'm delighted to be here and very surprised. I was originally going to be on the other panel, but apparently Cheryl Costa had to bail. And since Ron has done me favors in the past and he needed an extra person, plus he needed someone to really make you guys look good by comparison, I actually agree to this. So I really think it's fair to me and the listeners just maybe to give a little bit of background as to why I'm here, besides the fact that I'm pinch hitting for Cheryl. I first met you, Richard, back in about 2013 at the International UFO Congress. And you were at your table, and I loved your book. I think it was the second book in the series, the National Security State. Of course, we loved it. And I've talked to you, just briefly since then. And of course, Danny, I met you when we were both speakers at the 2019 conference in Laughlin, and I believe Bob Brown just briefly introduced us, and you were busy getting ready for some other interview. So I have actually met both of you before, but clearly this is the group of countries that end in Stan, Afghanistan and Uzbekistan, and I'm the sneaky country named Chad trying to fit in here. So clearly I don't have your broad experience or whatever, but I am going to try to do my best. And I think the reason that I am here is because, and I was asked to be on that first panel, as I wrote a trilogy of books called Alien Shades of Grays, and the last two specifically dealt with that issue of, who are they and why are they here? So book 2 was called Victoria's Secret Truth, and it was a 2-year case study I did of a family that had contact with entities they didn't quite understand. And in the end, looking at all the clinical evidence, which included 4 hypnotic regressions with 3 of the top regressionists in the world, which included 2 by Dr. Leo Sprinkle, 1 by Barbara Lamb, and 1 by Yvonne Smith. It concluded that this individual was telling the truth and that she had been part of a hybridization program. So that was kind of my deep dive into what was going on and what these people were doing. My latest book is Swamp Gas My Ass. And basically, and I'm glad you chuckled because I had to fight my wife tooth and nail to get that title past her. Basically what it is, it's a story of 2 pilots who actually intercepted the famous 1966 Michigan UFO, the one, of course, which Dr. Hynek tried to explain as swamp gas. So after several years of chasing down leads and a lot of legwork, I uncovered the lead pilot for that day. His name was Colonel Gary K. Carroll. And if you ever read the book, you'll discover that Colonel Carroll had in his career, some very responsible positions. In fact, at one time, he was head of Air Forces Iceland, which would be our first line of defense should the Soviet Union decide to bring their nuclear bombers up over the pole and down to Canada to try to get us. He was also in charge of the air defense for the entire eastern part of the United States on one of his assignments. He had over 5,000 hours in our best fighter interceptors. And in March of 1966, he was scrambled. He was on 5-minute alert, and he and his wingman, Colonel Bob Nicholson, intercepted one of those swamp gas UFOs, had them on radar, and had them in visual for 45 minutes. I found Colonel Carroll, who unfortunately just passed in November of last year, but I had the opportunity for a full 12-month period to interview him and record those interviews over 30 hours. And there were many times when we just got together to go over the manuscripts and that sort of thing. And unfortunately, a few of those sessions are not recorded. But I have his official military records, his DD-214s, which are published in the book with his permission. I have the DD-214s of his wingman that day, Bob Nicholson, whose family provided those to me. Those are published in the book. I have the memoirs of his wingman, Bob Nicholson, and there are a great deal of those were excerpted into the book and published. I also used previously classified top secret Umbra NSA documents to verify some of their story. And that, of course, is also included in the book. So if we go back to what was happening in Michigan in 1966, the entire area of southeastern Michigan where these events took place were ringed with Nike Hercules missiles, 6 sites of which had nuclear warheads. So the entire city of Detroit was surrounded with nukes. Not only that, but there were 2 squadrons of F-106s at Selfridge Air Force Base in southeastern Michigan, which is the location where these 2 pilots scrambled on that afternoon. Those F-106s were nuclear capable. They had about 40 of these on the base. So doing a little bit of math, maybe half of them could have been armed. And the reason they were is the strategy was if the Soviet nuclear bombers made it up over the pole and were coming down through Canada, those fighter interceptors were going to be scrambled northbound into Canada. And the strategy was to shoot that F-106 in the right direction, launch that Genie nuclear missile, cut off at Mach 2, and hopefully detonate that missile and blow up all those Soviet bombers as they made their way down through Canada. So, you know, the why of, you mentioned nuclear before, Michigan was loaded with nukes in 1966. And that would have been, if nukes were still of interest to our visitors then, that would have been a great place to understand what we were doing with them militarily. So that's kind of my intro into this. And, you know, now you guys know a little bit more about my background. And one more thing is I worked for nearly 4 decades as a senior scientist at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So that may be of interest to you.
I just want to jump in before anyone else. So Ray, I love that. I'm buying your book. And what's fascinating about what you just said is how you took a very iconic moment in UFO history, that March 1966, the swamp gas moment, of course, and you brought in a critically important national security element to that whole thing. I did not know about any of that, so I'm grateful. And it reinforces how the UFO phenomenon for decades and generations has had supreme national security implications. And that's serious. That's serious stuff. And then interpreting what was going on behind the scenes is the real problem, the real difficulty. And, you know, who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? I don't know. But clearly there was trouble going on in Paradise, and we did not know about it. I'm grateful personally that you wrote this book. When we're done here today, I'm ordering it.
Well,
Just
thank
wanted
you.
to say. So, yeah,
I'd be happy to send you an autographed copy.
I'll give you the address.
Free of charge. We'll work that out in the background.
All right. Okay.
Through our host.
Sounds good. All right, great.
Great.
Go ahead, Danny. You're going to jump in there. Go ahead.
Well, no, I think that this is demonstrative of all of the extraordinarily interesting dimensions of this whole issue. You know, they range all the way from the national security state implications of this, both with regard to the present and even past decades of our national security state functioning to perceive these visitors, you know, through the prism of a national security lens, but all the way up to trying to deal with this in sort of a trans-historical perspective of what the importance of this particular period is, assuming that we can survive and not destroy ourselves with thermonuclear weapons, because I agree with you, Richard, that I don't have any great sense that the extraterrestrial visitors are going to intervene and say, oh, gee, let's make sure this particular species on this planet doesn't destroy itself. I think that they're more concerned about us coming out into space, bringing this type of mindset, obviously. You know, and when you see a thing happen like that, one of the more powerful nations on the entire planet chooses a person like Donald Trump, you know, to be president, and he by a stroke of a pen orders the establishment of a space force and talking about lifting missiles up and putting them out into outer space. You know, I mean, he's the worst nightmare that our species could have.
Hey, Danny, might they not care about the planet though? Maybe they want the planet, or they don't want that.
There's lots of speculations about that, of course. But I mean, you have to understand that now with the James Webb telescope up now, where we're searching out to the very reaches of the universe itself, the total sum mass of energy of our whole universe, at least ostensibly, and that they're being able to actually see potentially the surfaces of some of these exoplanets. You know, I mean, the reality is that our species is right on the very brink now of not only discovering the existence in an official capacity of the extraterrestrial civilization, but the mindset that we're reflecting here on our planet, with which we're going to reach out and encounter them, is dire indeed. You know, that as you point out, Richard, you know, I mean, we're moving into a stage of kind of a centralized, globalized national security state. That, you know, that while on the one hand there may be some conceivable advantages to that, so that the extraterrestrial civilization can talk, you know, to us with one voice to us, but the reality of this is that, you know, the people that are in charge of this global national security state are, you know, a 1/10 of 1/100% of our total population, who are greedy, avaricious, you know, self-serving, and closed-minded, and so that, you know, that my sense of it is that they're going to discover that not only that there are more than 100 billion stars in our galaxy and more than 200 billion stars in our galaxy, they're probably going to discover there's more like 500 billion stars in our galaxy, most of them having planetary systems. So, I mean, our hubris of our human family is in danger of extending out to hubris on behalf of our own planet, of how wonderful and terrific our whole planet is. And like it's sort of the envy of all these different stellar systems around the universe. It's probably not that true. I think I agree with Richard that they're more concerned about us coming out into their domain and bringing with us this kind of belligerent, you know, supercilious, domineering mindset. And so that they'd like to confine us to our planet, hoping that over time, conceivably, if we don't destroy ourselves, that we'll evolve into a higher state of consciousness and might be much more welcome, you know, coming out into their domain. I think these are all subjects that we need to be discussing among ourselves, because that more than just the Catholic Church has called us to have this discussion about the profound philosophical and theological implications of contact with an extraterrestrial civilization. As you, Richard,
I want to add.
We have political, economic, sociological, psychological, all kinds of dimensions of things we need to address ourselves. Go ahead, Richard.
This is really leading into transhumanism, which I'm very uncomfortable with.
Yeah.
But it might be inevitable. By the way, I don't want to make this about Trump per se, but I personally do not think Trump was the problem. I think the much greater problem is the Davos crowd, the World Economic Forum today, of which they hated Trump. And they hated Trump for very specific reasons. Not to make Trump the savior, but these folks they are interested in creating a centralized, as I see it, global anthill. And Trump really wasn't along with that specific agenda. And so they had to take him down. That's my take. Yeah. But the real issue is, if we're going to be moving into a galactic community of some sort, I've speculated. I don't really even know if that galactic community is organic. It might be AI dominated by a super sentient algorithm. It might be what we would call spiritual, if we really understand what that even means. But it wouldn't be organic, like biological life forms. And the reason I think that is, if they've been monitoring us for a long period of time, which it looks like to me, it might indicate that they have an incredibly stable hierarchy. And if they have a very, very stable hierarchy, like we don't have a stable hierarchy, really. If you look at national governments throughout human history, like, can they plan more than 10 years ahead? You know, Egyptian pharaohs had a nice run at it. Hitler thought he could have a 1,000-year right. That didn't work out very long. Like, we don't have the ability, generally speaking, to plan out for centuries and centuries, but they seem to be able to. And if that's true, then it implies to me that they're stable to the point of almost being static. If that's the case, we're at a point in our development where we're definitely not static. We're not stable. We're highly creative. We're highly innovative. That's what happens when you have freedom. Freedom creates instability. Freedom creates all kinds of unknown outcomes. And so I suspect that the transformation we're going through is one to create a transhuman society that we living here probably would not like. But that future generations, they'll just grow into it and they'll be, oh yeah, we've always been the Borg. This is how it's supposed to be. And that might be that might be the only way. I mean, I hate this thought, but it might be the only way that we actually have a genuine connection with these other beings, because when you're in a highly sophisticated infrastructure, the thing that you can't have is unknown instability and that messy thing called freedom that can cause problems. So I think what we can see in our world right now is that freedom really has to be excised from their point of view, because we've got this incredibly intricate, legalistic, bureaucratic framework where there are no more unknowns allowed anymore. You see this. The surveillance is comprehensive. The laws are becoming comprehensive. No more wiggle room for freedom. And if that's a natural progression of society, then I might suspect that this is what we're going to be moving into. And when you look at people's interactions with the gray aliens, for example, and you study that, one thing you don't get with gray aliens is like they're hanging around with a cup of coffee, just bitching about their day. Like they're just like these robots. They're androids. They're these created beings now maybe we're not allowed to see them in their off duty, but I don't know. I think we've had enough interactions that people have indicated where these beings, this is just how they are. They are created. They're probably not even natural organisms. They're probably artificially created biological organisms that are cybernetic in some way. And what if that's the natural, logical future, if we can see that happening? If that's the case, like, is that a good thing? Back in the 50s and 60s, people were like, yeah, these aliens are going to lead us into something better. But to me, I mean, I'm almost afraid of that vision. Like, to me, it almost seems anti-human. I like being a biological, limited, flawed human being that's going to die one day, that's going to die with mystery that I'll never know. That's just me, because that's the human condition. And that's how I kind of was raised to believe in that. But the idea that you have in ufology going back generations of joining a galactic community, it's very much in line with the transhumanist people like Ray Kurzweil and all the other transhumanists that are here today. It seems to me it's like being human as we are right now, this isn't good enough. Maybe it isn't good enough. Maybe we are too violent. Maybe the society that we're living in, this totally unnatural human civilization of almost 8 billion people, which never should have happened. This was never how we were meant to be, in my view. I think this whole thing's a mistake. We were hunters and gatherers living in communities of 10, 15 people for hundreds of thousands of years. Now suddenly we're in these huge cities where we have these sociopathic tendencies because we don't know our neighbors. Like, we're in this very weird society. So maybe we have to change our nature and become ants or become bees in a beehive and not become human beings. Because human beings, as we have been, like, we are aggressive. We had to be aggressive. We had to have sharpened sticks to take down big animals, like, for a long time. And now we're in a situation where, that doesn't work for us. But the question is, how do you change human nature so rapidly without mass psychosis and mass mental illness? I don't think it's possible. I think we're moving into an era of massive mental illness. And, like, this is how we're going to have disclosure as a society of a completely fucked up human civilization where people are just, I mean, sorry, but, like, this is what I think. Like, look all around you. We're not getting better. We're getting worse. We're not going to higher consciousness. We're going to lower consciousness. You have a small group of people who are, yes, delving into truly elite, and elite in a good way, like higher level consciousness. And you've got everyone else jacking into the matrix, essentially. I don't see that as a positive development. So what I see is they're going to be led along like a ring through the nose of a big beast in the field into this new situation that will be guided probably by the good people at Davos and all their cronies who are running every single national government, basically. And they got the whole thing worked out. And then they'll probably do depopulation because there's too many of us. They'll figure that whole thing out. Maybe they're working on that now for all we know. And I'm not expecting this to be a good thing. Maybe it's a necessary thing. But for me, I'm not seeing much of a positive outcome here. I want to be wrong.
Go ahead, Ray. Your turn.
Oh, great. Just wonderful to have this ringside seat with you gentlemen. And, I'll be honest, these are just things that I don't think about now. I'm retired. For me, it's like, where's my next tea time? But the question, when I knew I was shifting panels here, I did some cramming and I went, onto Amazon and I was looking for things and I found Danny back in the unacknowledged stuff, and I found Richard in some things to try to get, some more, ideas of their fundamentals. And the thing that just kept popping back at me actually was from Danny's appearance in Unacknowledged and watching that whole Stephen Greer thing and all those people coming through. And there's some pretty solid pieces there, but it made me wonder, are we really ready for this contact? I mean, for 75 years, it was obfuscated and there was a lot of lying going on, and people were just like, yeah, I've got other things to do. I really don't want to hear about it. And now with everything going on in the world with, wars starting to crank up, and we've got this COVID thing that we've totally lost control of. Is this really a good time before anyone has done a risk assessment, for example, of, do we really want to go out there with those laser beams like Dr. Greer and those groups are doing and going, come on, boys, come on in, this is really a good place, follow the beam. And I'm really not so sure about that. And I'd really like to posit that to you gentlemen. Do you think this is a really good time where we need to be actively promoting another civilization to come drop in on us?
Talk to that, Danny.
Hey.
Hawking warned against it.
I know they sure have. My sense is this: that again, as you guys probably know, I mean, my initial kind of professional involvement in this whole area, other than my fascination with it, as I'm sure all of us here have had, from the time we were little, interested in stars and potential other civilizations, etc. My professional relationship with this whole issue began when I was at Jesuit headquarters. I say Jesuit headquarters. I was the co-director, basically, of their public policy for the largest single order in all the major denomination in Western civilization. So I came at it through this issue of theological, philosophical, kind of metaphysical interest in what all this implies for our people, for our planet. And I keep seeing this as a perspective issue, is that if we can have the perspective, not so much right now of talking to them, contacting them, going out to see them, but coming to a full realization that this other dimension of reality exists, and it might help us get over this kind of extraordinary hubris of, on the one hand, as I've said many times, getting out a stick and drawing a line in the dirt and saying, if you climb over this line, I'm going to kill you because you're in my territory. This kind of parochial narrow-mindedness that we have here as a human species. But I think most everybody here realizes that I spend actually my day job is in civil liberties, in individual liberties, in human rights. I mean, I've got this Davos crowd in the Great Reset in this whole this World Economic Forum right straight in my crosshairs right now. I mean, I know exactly who these bad guys are. We're getting set to do a 24 episode podcast about these people and what the history is of this group and who they are and the way they've manipulated things and the kind of evil things that they have done. And that I continue to hold out hope on behalf of our human family as a whole, because of the concepts of democracy, individual rights, etc. I'm not a big fan of the nation state. I've never been enamored of the Treaty of Westphalia, generated by the royal families, dividing our planet up into these various spheres of influence and all of that. I view that as very primitive. So the question of what kind of culture we can evolve here on our planet that endorses individual liberties, maximizes our personal freedom, it enables us to restrain the kind of advantage taking that is going on the part of this 1/10 of 1% of the people, who leverage their access to the money system that they created for the most part to try to hold us all down. What I find is this is an absolutely extraordinary conversation that we need to have in the context of this larger extraterrestrial civilization. Not so much soliciting them to come in and save us, not encouraging us to go out and hurry up and contact them. People know that I don't agree on all fours with Dr. Stephen Greer. I think most everybody knows that right now, even though I've been general counsel for the Disclosure Project. I think that the disclosure of the existence of the extraterrestrial civilization is extremely important to us. I don't think that it should motivate us to want to go out and necessarily engage with them right now before we have this conversation ourselves. That's what's really what I'm in favor of, is stimulating this conversation, the kind of conversation we're having here today, and to draw more and more people into this. That Richard, you and I have had the beginnings of this conversation.
We sure did.
And we've been carrying on this conversation now for over a good decade or more. And I think we need to do that because these questions our human family has to address. And I think that the implications are not only for our relationship with an extraterrestrial civilization down the road, but trying to stave off this danger that you're talking about, this kind of globalization of a kind of Borg-like transhuman energy. The very people that we're talking about, I mean, people may not realize this. I mean, these people we're talking about that are at the World Economic Forum, I mean, these people are transhumanists. These people are into
totally 100%.
These people are eugenicists. I mean, these people have spent billions of dollars on eugenics, trying to figure out how to get rid of all the underlings. I mean, people need to understand who these people are. We've got a serious problem. We have kind of an alien element right here on our planet and within our own human family. This element is extraordinary, and we've got to figure out how, if we can, through democratic processes, if not through whatever means is necessary, to disempower these people. I would strongly recommend. There's a book out right now. It's called the Ministry of the Future. Is the book. I would recommend it to you. It's the Ministry of the Future, and it's all about our people trying to come to grips with the fact that 1/10 of 100% of our human family are killing our planet right now, and are continuing to do so. And the neoliberals are all walking around wringing their hands and pacing back and forth, figuring out how can we, without any kind of violence, without any kind of over confrontation of these rich people, how can we get them to agree with us that they ought to share more of the resources of the world? They ought to give us more liberty. I mean, this is a very interesting book.
Are you saying the neoliberals are trying to get the rich to share liberty?
Well, the liberals are. Liberals are the old liberals are still.
Yeah, the old liberals. They don't exist anymore, Danny. They died.
Well,
they've gone extinct.
I know that the Clintons and Al Gore and Sam Nunn and all those guys in the Democratic Leadership Conference did a great job of kind of attenuating the traditional liberal class. So the question is, in the progressive community, is there an adequate experiential appreciation of what could be genuinely acknowledged as a spiritual dimension, a kind of paranormal faculty that our human species has latent within us? Can we stimulate this adequately to exercise it and have it play a major role in the progressive worldview, so that we can make progress in the economic and political realm while recognizing the natural world? So I think this issue has to be undertaken within the progressive community. And as everyone knows, I believe that the reality of the different worldviews that our human family has, that I've talked about many times before, the spectrum of human worldviews has to be understood. And we have to have meaningful and real dialogue and conversation among the adherents to the worldviews to try to get at the answers to some of these fundamental questions. And I think that the reality of the existence of an extraterrestrial civilization is very important to stimulating us to have this conversation, because most of our people are not otherwise disposed to engaging in a serious conversation. They're spending their time consuming and, you know, getting and spending and laying waste their powers. So we've got to figure out a way to stimulate our people into having this fundamental, meaningful conversation, like we're having here today.
I have to jump in. Okay, first of all, you mentioned the Treaty of Westphalia, so I got very excited just because anyone in the UFO field who mentions that, I'm like, oh my God, I love this. And then you just quoted Wordsworth, one of my faves. So thank you.
Yes.
I always love being on things with you, Danny. That's just awesome. Like, okay, I hope someone else caught the Wordsworth reference there. I'm with you. A lot of the things you said, I'm totally on board with. I don't really consider myself a progressive anymore. They somehow, I don't know what happened somewhere along the way, but that's okay. One thing that I would say is that I would like to just address before I don't know how much time we have left, is the whole thesis that is possibly one of the most divisive theses in ufology. And it's not conservatism, liberalism. It's Dr. David Jacobs and the whole idea of alien infiltration and planetary takeover. And I don't know if I know of any single bit of research that is more divisive among the UFO research community than this idea that there are hostile aliens, or as opposed to the idea that they're not hostile, or as opposed to the idea that we have no idea what they are, and therefore why are we going into this fear-based ideology about these aliens taking over? To me, that is something that that I just want to address here. So, because I think it's relevant when we're dealing with the future of humanity and a post-disclosure world. I personally do credit most of what I read. I've read all of David Jacobs' books very carefully, and I think he has done, and I'm going to say this strongly, an outstanding job at doing genuine counterintelligence as best one can of these alien beings. We can't know everything that they're doing. It's true. We can't fully get inside their head, but we are smart enough that we can observe patterns. They are taking us. They are interested in our reproduction. There's no question about this. They are covert to the extreme. They have the ability, as Tracey mentioned in the last segment, of total cognitive manipulation. When they've got us, not only can they control our emotions, which we've seen countless times, they can control our memory. They can manage our memory. They can control us neurologically. If they don't want you to move a muscle, you're not going to move a muscle. So they've got us, and we can't deal with them. So they are taking us. Yes. They are interested in our reproduction. They are creating hybrids. Yes. They can control us. Yes. They can manage us in seemingly any way they want. None of that looks good to me. And then you go deeper into the research. None of this looks good. Stephen Greer has, in my opinion, an absolutely, not just an unhealthy attitude, I think a positively dangerous attitude about this whole phenomenon. But that doesn't mean that I want to go into complete fear-based mode, like, oh, we have to frighten the public up and run to the hands of the national security state. I've never said that. But right. I also want to I want to have my eyes open to what I feel like I'm in the middle of the shootout at the OK Corral. You want to know the truth? Like, there's no good guys here. And on the world stage, this is like The Godfather with the 5 families. There are no good families. Not the United States, not Russia, not China, not Europe. None of them are good. They're all oligarchies in one way or another. And these alien beings, these grays in particular, I don't know that they're good either. So I just feel like how to deal with them, and have they engaged in any kind of infiltration into our civilization? This is the worst question to ask, because it goes right into like invasion of the body snatchers scenario, and no one likes that. No one likes to go back to the Salem witch trial and like, you're an alien. But what if there is some level of infiltration and we're just blind to it? You get story after story. You can listen to Linda Moulton Howe's research, Whitley's research, David Jacobs' research, Barbara Lamb, who's like the most beautiful grandmother I wish I could have had. I had a beautiful grandmother. Barbara would have been a great substitute. Barbara, but even in her very wonderful interpretation, they're infiltrating our society. She just interprets it as more of a positive than I do. But however you look at it, they're infiltrating. And so what does that mean? Do they have influence? And then ask yourself this. We've just gone through 2+ years of COVID madness, insanity. I don't know how else to put it. We've destroyed our global economy in many ways, destroyed half the small businesses that exist in the United States, maybe Europe too. Like, this has been a bad thing. And I don't believe at all in the positive, beneficent motivations of any of our global leaders. I think they've been gleefully using this as their pretext to create this dystopia that they put us all in. But ask yourself this: is it possible? I don't have an answer to this. Is it possible, though, that the whole COVID nightmare has been orchestrated by an alien intelligence? Maybe they want to move us into this next phase of our existence. I don't know. But is it impossible? I'm going to say not impossible. How do we test this hypothesis? That's a more difficult question. And I feel bad even raising a hypothesis that I don't know how to test at the moment. But I just see a situation in which I don't see good guys out there. Certainly not the United States as a nation, whether it's Trump or Biden. My God, I mean, no way, not good guys. And I don't see good guys anywhere. And if there is an alien presence that is wanting to look out for us, I could believe that. In fact, I think I do believe that, but how active are they really? We've got some very good accounts of abductees who do indicate a beneficent, positive alien presence. So thank goodness for that. And I hope that's true. But they also don't seem to be bailing our sorry butts out of the fire. We're in a mess. So, all right, I wrote another note down here. Oh yes, progressivism. Yes, insofar as it promotes fundamental human rights and human dignity, particularly vis-a-vis an overwhelming power of the state. That's critically important. And if progressivism still means that, then yes, count me in as a progressive in that regard. So that's an area where genuine progressives and people have been who've become afraid of many aspects of progressivism today, which I include myself as one. This is the critical common ground. Because I'm really not I'm an old school liberal, really, is what I think I am, who believes in human rights, basically. And so that's how to maintain that in the face of dealing with basically the modern day version of the Mafia 5 families running the world. The only way we can do it, honestly, is by, I feel that the UFO research community has got to promote as much truth to the outside world as we can. And we can't sugarcoat things anymore. No more of this like, oh, well, maybe there's something out there. I understand why Lou has to say that.
Right.
Lou is bound by his security agreements. He can't, but others of us can. And the problem, though, is breaking through the monolithic media that is totally controlled. We have such an unbelievably controlled media, from Fox to the New York Times to CNN, all of them. And so there's YouTube, and that's being constricted. So thank God, I'm happy that Elon Musk bought Twitter. Maybe Twitter can open up a pipeline so that we can have a more open and honest and adult conversation about this subject, which we desperately need to have. We have got to wake as many people up as possible that there are abductions, there's a cover-up, there's an illegal criminal nature to this cover-up. Like, if we're not talking about that, then this whole thing can be dragged out for generations before we get any kind of actual so-called disclosure that will be pre-chewed by the national security apparatus and given to us through the mama bird known as the media, like we're little baby birds just taking the food from them that they've already chewed.
As it has been for these last few generations, right?
That's it. So, I mean, unless we're going to have a meaning, like we need that if we're going to have a meaningful disclosure. Otherwise, it will be a completely controlled disclosure in which it's not disclosure. It's just, a message that's been spun by them for their purposes, which I think that's what's happening. That's what I think.
Okay, Ray, before we run out of time, jump in here. Come on now. We don't want to.
Richard, a little twist on what you said. One of my theories is if you look at the timing, that perhaps this COVID thing was actually a test to see how we would respond to an alien virus that got loose. So, maybe the dark state knew that disclosure contact is closer than we think, and they put this out there to say, COVID out there to say, oh well, how are we going to react to this alien thing? Well, let's use COVID as a test case and see how do the countries respond. What will the people do if they're told they have to wear masks? So now we got a little bit more data on how to handle the aliens are here and they're bringing some bad stuff with them. The other thing I'd like to add is, the impact of these visitors in my personal experience is really all over the board. I've got personal friends. I'm only going to use my personal friends in this because I'm close to these people and I trust what they say. One has a couple of PhDs. One of them is in, biochemistry, and she's very well known in her field. She tells me only after she reads my second book, and I've known her for decades, only reveals to me after she reads Victoria's Secret Truth that she was visited when she was a small child. And she credits her incredible intellect to these visitors. So that's case number one. Case number two is Victoria, who says, well, I think I had a pre-birth agreement with these people or whatever they are, these entities, and I agreed to let them make me part of the hybridization program. And she's okay with that. She knows she was floated out through the wall. She knows she was on a spaceship. She knows that they were doing all these gynecological procedures on her, but she's okay with it. And then I've got another person who's also happens to be in the medical field, a first responder, nurse, very well accomplished in her field, who's had night terrors from the time she's a child until the present day because of her contact with these entities. And one day at dinner, she tells me recently, after reading my second book, she said, my children came to dinner one day and said, are we going to tell mom? And her husband said, tell mom what? And the husband had no idea that the wife has been through this her whole lifetime. And the woman didn't know that her children were about to tell the story. And they said, well, we want to let mom know that she and both of us, the two brothers, were on a spaceship together last night. Whereupon the husband nearly had a heart attack. Like, imagine getting your news at the dinner table. So
he's feeling like my wife and kids have both been alien abductees forever. He had no idea.
So you have this wide spectrum of, oh, well, it's really good because, Dr. Laurie's got this PhD and she's doing good for people and she credits her intellect to that. Then you got somebody who's got the hybridization program kind of in the middle. And then you got this other person who's had night terrors and now has a divorce. So do we really know what's going on with these folks? And do we really, again, I'll ask the question, do we really want to invite them by pointing these great things at the sky and say, come on in, guys, we got a landing spot all picked out for you. So, I'd like to just leave you guys with those thoughts.
I would say before we end, I might point out that I don't believe that that Stephen Greer and the other people that are pointing the laser beams out into outer space are going to necessarily influence what the decision is that's being made by the extraterrestrial people as to where and when they're going to have any contact with us or who they're going to contact. I do believe that there is a collective consciousness among in some type of apparent coordination among the different species of extraterrestrials. There's some kind of communication that seems to be going on among them to at least hold any of them that are overtly hostile to us in some degree of abeyance. But these are things that we have to have intelligent conversations about here among ourselves, and we do have to engage the levels of the human community that specialize in sociology, psychology, politics, economics, etc. And we really need to have this conversation. And I'm hoping that what's happened here in the last, since 2017 at least, is instigating more of that type of a conversation. We here, of those of us that have been involved in this for some decades now, need to turn our attention to try to facilitate that, to really invite that conversation, to really probe into this, explore what the topography is of the subject, what the various theories are about all this, etc. I've been approached by a major production company that want to hold trials about this, a thing called X trials. That they want me to be one of the litigators in trying to litigate these issues by bringing the real experts in, having the conversations, in panel genuine juries of our peers, putting cameras in the jury room so that when the dialogue is going on among real people about what they think about what the experts are saying, etc., it's just a device they're talking about focusing on this subject and trying to deal with that. But there are other avenues and means that we have to talk about. Richard, you and I have more conversations to have here about this, how we can facilitate, bring whatever the total number of years are that you and I have been in this field together. I think that we're both, I hope at least, viewed as two of the more level-headed guys that are involved in this. I don't think that we've alienated people in any of the camps. I know that Stephen Greer is upset that I'm, representing Lou Elizondo, and I know that Lou is upset about some of the things that Stephen does, et cetera, as many people are. But I think that what we have to do is try to bring our history and our experience together to help stimulate and instigate this dialogue. I really do. I think the time is ripe for us to do this. And I think that conversations like this, I'm just plugging in my computer so it doesn't run out of gas, that we should have the conversations about how to help do this. And Ray,
totally on board.
Yeah.
Agreed. And listen, you guys are the pillars of this community, and we are so indebted to you. And thank you so much today for taking the time and sharing your time with us, your valuable time with us, your insights with us. We all really, really, really appreciate it. So thank you guys so much. And thanks to Steve, Alan, and Tracey as well. I'm going to let you guys go now. You can go put your avatars on and get on the platform and say hello to people if you'd like. That's going to be over at the New Paradigm Pavilion right across the street from here. So thank you again, guys. Appreciate it.
Terrific. Thank you,
Great
guys.
pleasure. Thank you,
guys. Thank you so much for letting me join you.
Well, thank you, Ray. We appreciate
awesome.
you.
Everything was great.
Thank you so much. Thanks, guys.
Okay, so now we're going to take a quick minute here. I just want to let everybody know, for those of you who don't know, that this specific platform, the Observation Deck platform that we're on today, the metaverse, if you will, is ending today. This has just become too expensive of a venture for us, and we're going to have to move on to a new adventure, a new venue to hold these kind of events with. This was a great pleasure today to have all 6 of these speakers, obviously. So stay in touch with us. Go to our email list, join our email list, check in with theobservationdeck.com, see what's happening, see our links for our videos for past events. You're welcome to all that material. We have my podcast is on YouTube as the Observation Deck as well. So check all that out. Stay in touch with us, and we'll keep you up to date as to where we're going to move to and where we'll be doing other events. Meanwhile, I want to just take a quick minute here and just thank some of the people real quick who made this place possible. No one ever made a dime here, and it's absolutely amazing what we were able to pull off, and the connections that we've made and some of the insights that were shared on this platform have been absolutely incredible. And meant a lot to a lot of us. And I just want to really quick thanks a lot of these people real fast. Of course, the mayor of our avatar world, Jordan Pease, who's really behind everything we've done on here. Kate Chassé. Robert Lemke has been on this platform more than I think the developers who created the platform. Robert has just volunteered to help us and done a great job, and I appreciate it. Nikki has helped us out. Nikki Clifton, Mackenzie Marcone, Matthew Mello. Really appreciate you guys helping us this whole year. It's been wonderful. I also want to thank real quick our supporters and promotional partners, which are Sophia V. Thank you. Ryan Stacy, Michael Ney, Jimmy Church, Alan Steinfeld, everyone else who's helped us, who's been a part of this in any way, shape, or form, or touched this community. We really appreciate it. And hopefully we can all do some more stuff in the future. So thanks everyone who also participated in coming to some of these events. Hopefully you enjoyed events like today. We were able to put 6 amazing speakers on for free today. And hopefully you guys enjoyed it. And hopefully you'll keep following us and find out what we've got coming up in the future. So now let's all go over to the go-to menu and select the new Paradigm Pavilion. And then you can just go to that pavilion. And then most of the speakers are going to come over there and we can hang out with them and talk to them and amongst ourselves as well. So thanks everyone for coming, and I'll see you over there. Oh,